Whether you're a cradle Catholic or a new convert, we all have questions about our faith traditions. From the history, to the prayers, to the culture it's inspired, there's so much to explore. To help us make sense of it all, I'll be talking to the experts at the Church of St. Paul the Apostle in New York City to get to the heart of how to live out our sacred and ancient faith in the modern world. No matter how long you've been journeying with Christ, we could all use a bit more practice. I'm Jack Schneider, and this is Practicing Catholic. Hi everybody, welcome back to Practicing Catholic. Today I'm sitting down with Father Evan Cummings. I'm actually really excited to have Father Evan on because actually a lot of my conversations with him were a big inspiration to this podcast. Father Evan is currently the Associate Director at Busted Halo, but before that he was the Associate Pastor here at the Church of St. Paul the Apostle, and before that was the Associate Director of the Newman Center at The Ohio State University. Father Evan, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy that I was such a good influence, I guess.
So today we're going to be talking about the upcoming papal conclave. So I guess first question, before we get to the actual discussion of the conclave, what's going on in the Vatican right now that we don't have a pope?
Not a lot, honestly. So upon the death of a pope, basically all appointments made by the pope cease. The cardinals and other folks who have taken those positions may continue them in a certain way just to keep the momentum going, but they're not really able to make any decisions or do any grand actions or start new initiatives. So in that sense, not a lot happening in the Vatican. A lot of it just kind of is okay, we have to pause until we have a new Holy Father. The exception being the Apostolic Penitentiary, the highest court in the Catholic Church. That one is still functioning and still producing the various sentences on anything from annulments and laicizations and things like that. Meanwhile, all the cardinals are gathering in the Vatican, so there's a lot happening there, but it's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action as of yet. They're building up to the action. And
of course, with the Pope, not only of course being the sort of the pastor for the entire church, but he's also the leader of a country. Mm-hmm. So what's going on with the Vatican itself? How's that being managed right now?
Yeah, so the Vatican gets managed largely by the Camerlengo of the house from the papal household. Historically, the Camerlengo would manage a lot of the Vatican city-state and the papal states in an interregnum period, but now it's a little simpler. So it's taken care of partially by the Camerlengo, partially by the Dean of the College of Cardinals. But mostly, again, it's something that's pretty self-sustaining and is able to kind of glide through a period like this without too much action. Part of the Camerlengo's duties historically was defending the autonomous rights of the Vatican as a nation state. Fortunately, less needed these days.
And so who chooses the date for the next conclave to start?
Yeah, so the Dean of the College of Cardinals is in charge of actually coordinating the conclave itself, and there's rules that it has to start after what's known as the Novum Diali, the 9 days of mourning, which start on the day of the Pope's funeral. So it has to wait until after that's over, but it can't wait more than 20 days after that. And it specifically states that it should be 15 to 20 days that they should get started. And so the cardinals have been gathering, the dean has been organizing them, and each, you may have heard in the news around these general congregations that the cardinals are having. So those are led by 3 cardinals plus the dean, and they help to manage organizing the funeral, planning out the conclave itself, like when it's going to start, who's going to give what sermon, and generally speaking and organizing the cardinals so that they can talk about the state of the church and the state of the world. So the discernment is already happening.
So do the cardinals, do they meet regularly when there is a pope, or is this the first time they're all kind of getting to meet each other?
So every time that the Pope names new cardinals, other cardinals are invited to participate and be present and act as, they are a college, they act together as a body. We all know the reality of our life schedules and that's not always possible. This is actually the first time that some of these cardinals will have met, period. Pope Francis really did choose so many cardinals from all over the world, the first cardinal of Haiti, the first cardinal of Mongolia, And for some of these cardinals, it really is the first time that they're getting to actually be in a room together as one whole body. So normally, yes, but life happens too.
And so I guess that must be really important because they're all of them together deciding which one of them is going to be the next pope.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there any idea of what sort of qualities they're looking for in the next pope? Or
Yeah, so when we talk about the conclave, probably something that comes to a lot of people's minds is A, the movie. It's not like the movie, I promise. But B, that it is secret. Like what goes on in the conclave itself is totally secret, and you're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to talk about who got how many votes. And so people think that everything going in has a level of secrecy, and there is some, but there's also a lot of what they're talking about in these general congregations is very public, and the media is there and is able to sort of overhear some of these conversations and overhear particularly like the sermons that are being given, especially during the Novum Diali, because all of the cardinals are gathering in St. Peter's, and a different one of them is giving a homily each day. And so they are talking about what it means to continue to be church, synodality, the legacy of Pope Francis, the legacy of the Second Vatican Council, what that means, what's going on in the broader world, and what we need in response to it. So.
And what's kind of the need for that secrecy?
Yeah, honestly, I don't really know, actually.
Yeah.
Now that I have to sit and think about it, I'm like,
Yeah.
It's just the way it's done.
Yeah.
And I think maybe there might be a sense of protecting sort of the ongoings and the having that sense of confidentiality and that space to be able to speak freely might be part of it, and also protecting people and not being, making them targets of attack from opponents after the conclave. That could be a factor too. But again, it's just, we've been doing this since the 13th, 14th century. It's the way we do it.
And so when that sort of vow of secrecy hits, who and where is kind of locked off? Is it the entire Vatican?
It is the College of Cardinals in the Sistine Chapel. And now obviously they are not locked in there to sleep. They are allowed to go. They're all kept in the Sancta Marta domicile, which is where Pope Francis actually lived. But that's been cleared out, and no one's allowed in there other than the cardinals and the staff. And they basically go from there to the Sistine Chapel and back, and that's all they're allowed to do, basically. There's part of the ritual itself of a conclave is, I forget if it's the dean or the papal master of ceremonies, but basically says, get out everyone, go away, and then closes and locks the door.
And so, they're all kind of locked in together. How long does this process take?
So historically, the longest one is 2 years and 10 months. We're probably not going to have to deal with that. The more recent conclaves have honestly lasted only a few days. And I think a major portion of that is a desire to have a pope picked to continue the life of the church and keep things going, so there's not a lot of waiting time. And also, these cardinals have jobs. They're bishops of dioceses, they're heads of dicasteries. They have things to get back to. So they don't want to be locked in there forever either. So I think there is that sort of internal push to be like, okay, we got to get this done. Pope Francis was chosen on day 2, I believe, in the afternoon vote. Benedict was on day 3. So, they're at most maybe 5 days is what we could expect. But I'd honestly expect day 2 or 3 we'll have a new pope.
So how many votes do they do per day? Is that like a set number, or does that just depend on how quickly they can get it done?
Yeah, so there are set numbers of voting. So the first day that they go in, they first hear a sermon outside of the chapel, and then they go into the chapel and they hear another sermon, and then it's locked, and they make their first vote. And that's it. That's the first day. The days following, they make votes in the morning, votes in the afternoon. And I don't remember the specific numbers, but there is a system wherein if it's after 5 days or something like that, if no pope has been chosen, then they just take the top 2. And they're like, okay, college, you are only allowed to vote on these 2 until we have a 2/3 supermajority on one of them. So, it helps streamline the process so that it can't get bogged down and constantly be well, and he's got a 5th, 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 and he's got a 5th. No, it's 2, pick.
Yeah, especially I'm sure because that 2/3 bar is pretty high.
Yeah, so right now there are 100 and I believe the current count is 133 who will be voting. There are 135 under the age of 80, but one is not eligible to vote and one is not able to come because of his health. And so a supermajority is approximately 88, 89 out of that 130 or so.
So are only the voting cardinals able to go to the conclave, or are the other cardinals able to just sit in?
Yeah, other cardinals can sit in and can give their wisdom, and it's kind of expected to a certain degree. Some of them choose to sit out either because of age or health, or some of them actually choose to stay outside of the conclave so that they can be sort of present to the church beyond and help fulfill that pastoral role. But a lot of them also do attend, and even if they can't vote, they'll make speeches and be like, "This is a good person. This is what we need," or
And so when somebody finally hits that 2/3 bar, what happens?
So when someone finally hits that 2/3 bar, the dean goes to them and says, basically, "Do you accept?" And they take them off to a room called the Room of Tears. It has a lovely name, and in there are 3 cassocks in white, small, medium, and large. And the Pope, the newly chosen Pope, puts one on, and part of the "Do you accept?" is "What's your name?" So these guys got to have their papal names ready. And then the Pope the newly elected Pope spends some time in quiet prayer. The white smoke goes up, and everyone in the in the square gets excited. And then he appears on the balcony and he gives a blessing. And we saw with Pope Francis particularly beautiful humility. And before even giving the blessing, he said, "Please pray for me." And the whole crowd went quiet for a minute and just was quietly praying for Pope Francis, because he was undertaking a huge responsibility, and he wanted them to participate and join him in that journey.
So is this how the process has always looked, or
No.
Historically? So historically it was different.
Oh yeah, I mean, we've had multiple models throughout history. The very early, obviously the first Pope Peter, no conclave, no voting, just Jesus going, "Your name is Peter, the rock. You're going to lead." But even Peter choosing his successor, he chose it. So it passed to Clement, and we hear that in the Eucharistic prayer. Peter, Clement, Cletus. I forget the exact order, but the idea is that in the early days it was kind of this chosen thing. It evolved over time, and we wound up actually having a lot of the popes picking their successors from the College of Deacons. Because there's the 3 orders in the church of deacon, priest, or presbyter, as it was known at the time, and bishop. And so the Pope would choose the deacons because the deacons serve the bishop and are close to him, so he knows them. And so there's this guy, Hippolitis, who was a presbyter in Rome, and he got really upset over that. And he's like, "This is ridiculous. A pope should be coming from the presbyters, from the elders, from the priests, not from the deacons." And he made himself pope. So he was an anti-pope, and not the last one, but he actually did ultimately reconcile with the church, and he was able to return and be in communion with his former rival. But there was sort of over time, the church kind of transitioned from the sense of choosing your successor to it being something that's elected. So it's kind of this voice of the clergy of Rome and the people of Rome. There's one bishop or one pope who was supposedly chosen because a dove landed on him. But then at a certain point, it was kind of like, no, we need to normalize and regularize this, and that's when the whole College of Cardinals and the voting sort of transferred to them, and then becoming the conclave later.
So of course the Pope is traditionally a cardinal, but could they in theory pick anybody?
Sure. Well, not anyone. Sorry, ladies. It has to be a guy. Any baptized and confirmed male in the Catholic Church who's in good standing is an eligible member or an eligible candidate for the papacy. So you or I are technically in the running right now. I don't. Our chances don't look great, and that's okay. It's probably for the best.
I don't know if I'm ready for that.
That's fair. I think historically there have been non-cardinals chosen, but it's so rare. And at this point, just given the size of the church and the size of the Vatican and everything, you kind of want someone who knows a little bit of the inside baseball. I don't have those skills. If they called me up and were like, "We think you should do this," I'd be like, "No, I literally wouldn't know where to start."
Yeah.
So
Quite the undertaking.
Exactly.
And so in that situation, would the person theoretically have to be consecrated as a bishop?
Yes. So if someone is not in the proper clerical state, he is then ordained with whatever he needs to be ordained. So if he's if you were to be chosen as pope, you'd be flown to the Vatican, and the dean would celebrate a mass and ordain you as a deacon, and then celebrate another mass and ordain you as a priest, and then celebrate another mass and ordain you as a bishop. I don't know if those would all be in the same day or sequential days, but yeah, the dean has the authority, because normally consecrating or ordaining a bishop has to be done with papal approval. Well, without a pope, how do you do it? Well, the dean has standing rights to ordain the new pope to the episcopate if need be.
And so, of course, the number of people who actually have a legitimate chance of being pope is small.
Yes.
And if anyone's been reading the news lately, there's been a lot of talk of, oh, we think this cardinal's good, we think this cardinal's good, this is a liberal cardinal, this is a conservative cardinal, etc. Is that speculation of any use?
No. Honestly, no. I mean, if you look at sort of the Vegas odds, Francis was a dark horse. Like, no one expected him. And ultimately, I trust in the guidance of the Holy Spirit. There's that quote that always goes around at conclaves of Pope Benedict of like, oh, the Holy Spirit doesn't choose the Pope. And it's like, well, this is true, but we hope that the cardinals picking the Pope are listening to the Holy Spirit. They are spending time in prayer and Mass and whatnot, We hope that at this point in their clerical career, they know how to listen. So I trust in the presence of the Holy Spirit amidst the cardinals. And, and a lot of folks are trying to say, oh, well, I really like this candidate because of X, Y, Z. And it's like, that's not what a pope is. Like, a pope is not a president of the United States. The pope is not a king of England. Like, you can't map these one-to-one. Like, these political systems just don't line up or make sense at the end of the day. There are certain parallels that you can draw, but you can't just plop it on and say, this is exactly what it is.
And so instead of speculating, what should we as sort of, the Catholic faithful around the world, what should we be doing during this time?
Praying. I don't know what else to say. It seems a pretty simple answer. Yeah. No, but in all honesty, praying. And I've seen a thing going around. It was like a list of the College of Cardinals who are electors and are also, therefore, the most in the running. And it was just pick one and pray for them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like pray for them that they become pope, not pray for that. It's just pray for them and their well-being and their own discernment in this time. And I like that. It's just pray. It's what else can we do? We're not, our opinions matter in the church, but also like they're not asking you or I to go to the Vatican to talk to the cardinals, but I can pray. Yeah. And I believe that has power and is efficacious. Mm-hmm. I would be this if I didn't.
Yeah. So, Father, you were ordained in 2019. So this is your first conclave as a priest.
It is.
Is that experience different for you than in 2013?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a really good question. So the 2013 conclave, I had been applying to the Paulists at that point. So like I was in a trajectory. So like I was keeping a close eye on it. But now as a priest, there's definitely an element of a lot of folks asking me, sometimes just like questions, especially on like my streaming that I do, asking me questions of like, what's the process, kind of a lot of what we've been talking about here, but also sometimes people asking me my opinion and be like, who do you think's gonna be it, or what do you think about Cardinal so-and-so, and my answer is usually, it's just the same of like, I'm not in charge, I think they're a fine candidate, but like, I don't know all the details. It's interesting because it feels a little bit more like I have to represent it in a way, even though I'm so remotely detached.
Yeah, and I'm sure as a priest, the leadership of the next pope is going to have maybe a more acute effect on you than it might as on me, a layperson.
It might, but I think Pope Francis certainly showed us a pope who speaks to the whole church and speaks to the laity as well, and calls upon the involvement of the laity and what that means and what it means to be a church on mission. So I would hope that the next pope does also speak to the realities of the laity and is a spiritual father in that role. But you're also right in that, like, if he updates canon law, you're probably not going to care as much as I will when I have to like open my code and be like, is this one new? No, got to cross that one out.
So on the first day of this new papacy, let's say someone finally hits the two-thirds bar, they've given the blessing to the world, they go back into the Vatican, what happens next?
Well, I hope they take a good night's sleep and just, because they're probably full of anxiety and head spinning at that point, and it's just, a lot to take in. But the first day, I don't remember specifically anything about Pope Francis, but it would probably be an appearance at the balcony, probably some sort of speech and a blessing, and probably repeating that over the next few days, especially because a lot of pilgrims come in during a time of conclave in hopes of getting to be there when it's time. So that would probably kind of continue for a few days, and then it's probably going to be, so it starts on Wednesday, and they're hoping probably that by Sunday they could have a massive installation at the Lateran, because he is the Bishop of Rome, and so he needs to be formally installed as the Bishop of Rome, beyond just being elected as Pope and taking over that role within the Vatican. There's also that sacramental and ecclesial role within just the literal Diocese of Rome.
And so in that period between the election and the installation, are there any powers that the Pope doesn't have?
That is a great question about canon law that I am not necessarily an expert in. I would say there's probably certain things, just like any bishop. So like if someone is named bishop-elect of a diocese and he's either not ordained or he's already ordained a bishop, but he hasn't officially taken over, there are certain things he can't do yet because he's not the bishop. And canon law says like the bishop must do this, and it's not like a guy who's a bishop, it's the bishop. So probably some of those things, and probably like appointing people within the dicasteries and whatnot, but that would happen pretty quickly. Most often at the very beginning, a lot of those are just, okay, who was the guy there last time? Great, he's still going to be in it, and we're going to just move forward for now, and I'm going to shake things up and rearrange later.
Now, is the Diocese of Rome, is that administered differently than other dioceses?
Oh boy, howdy is it? So obviously, as Pope, he is Bishop of Rome, but he's also Pope of the whole Church, and has this role of pastor and being all over the place and like managing the Vatican and this and that. So like the actual like day-to-day minutia, maybe of like the budget, the managing of the individual churches, that gets broken up. And so the Diocese of Rome is actually broken up into what are called suburbicarian dioceses. There are 7 of them, including Rome itself, I believe. And other than Rome, the other 6 are all headed up by a cardinal bishop, which is just a rank within the College of Cardinals. And they are serving as the de facto bishop, basically, of that. And just there are people like the vicars general of Rome and the Vatican who are helping with kind of the day-to-day actual running. So like, Pope Francis doesn't have to meet with every candidate for the priesthood in his diocese who's applying. He may want to, but he can also delegate that and say, hey, I have a trip to Kuala Lumpur that I've got to make, or I'm needed at this conference in Nairobi or something, So he is the Bishop of Rome, but a lot of the day-to-day minutiae is actually sort of delegated and handled separately.
Right. So, of course, popes, they get to choose names, and have there been any historically, maybe not necessarily your favorite pope based on their reign, but maybe based on their name? Are there any really good pope names, maybe one that you're hoping gets picked again?
Cletus.
Cletus?
I just love the image of Pope Cletus.
You're not hoping for Sixtus VI? I
mean, Sixtus VI is pretty good. There's always been urban, so there should be a Pope suburban. But honestly, Pope Cletus II, because in Latin it's Anacletus, but I just love the image of like someone with a southern drawl, just like, I'm Pope Cletus, y'all.
Father Evan, any final thoughts?
Thank you for having me on. I recognize that I may, if you're looking to me as a source of perfect rules and wisdom on what a conclave is, I apologize. I maybe got some things wrong, so please have mercy on me. But hopefully this just helps to give a greater insight into what is happening in our church. So thank you for having me.
Father Evan, thank you so much for your time.